Right, okay, my name's Dave Barnes. Just want to show you a couple of models of instruments that I've built from scratch. The first one is an exact replica of a 1920s Abbott Monarch ukulele banjo. It's made identical from dimensions taken from an original 1920s pre-war, and this one, the only difference is that it's got a much more ornate resonator on it. The originals, and most of the ones I've made, have always been plain mahogany. This one I built for myself, decided I wanted to have a bit of a fancier back on it. So that's the very first one. I made 16 of those, and I'll later on take you to the workshop and show you some of the machinery that I need to actually produce these ukuleles. Now this one is what I've named the Baby Barnes, and it's not really what I would call a replica of the Baby Gibson uke banjos made back in the 20s and 30s, but I have to admit that the pots and the necks are absolutely identical to them. The only difference being that the finish on the resonators I did slightly differently. The resonators is exactly the same size. The hooks are more or less the same hooks, but with different nuts. And this uke I made 5 of. So that's that. Also, with these uke banjos, I designed the tail pieces for both models, and these tail pieces are an exact copy of the tail pieces that were put on most of the pre-war Abbott Monarchs, and also on the big Gibsons. Not the Baby Gibsons though, because they mostly had Nashville tail pieces on them. So they're the two models I've made. Whether I should be making any more in the near future, I'm not sure. And so perhaps you'd like to come with me out into the workshop where I can show you the machinery that I use to produce these, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about that. You ready?
Yep.
Okay, first of all, this is my bandsaw. It's a Record Power VS350. It's quite a large bandsaw. It's 2-speed, and it's capable of taking bandsaw blades from 1/4 of an inch up to 3/4 of an inch. And depending on the work that you're using will depend on the size of the blade. All the machines in my workshop are movable. They've got pedals at the bottom that lifts them up on wheels, so I can move it around because it's a relatively small workshop. But where they are at the moment, it's usually good enough. What I use this for is saves me a lot of work. If I'm making a neck, I will cut it out roughly flat down to the shape that it's going to be. Then it will be turned on its side, and the side shape will be turned over. It is a very rough cut, and everything has to be finished by hand at the end of the day anyway. You can't just finish it on a bandsaw, it's all going to be finished by hand. The other thing I use it for is for cutting out any circular stuff. If I want to cut out a perfectly round profile, I can do that with this piece of equipment, but you've got to know how to make up all the patterns and all the profiles and all the jigs to do it. So the bandsaw alone, you're not going to, you've got, there's other things you have to add to it to get to the final end. This machine over here is an absolute godsend. Its nickname is Overhand and Mangle when I was in the trade, but it's actually a planer thicknesser, and it's a fantastic bit of kit to use. It's one which I use in combination with the bandsaw, and the thicknesser on the top finishes wood. There's a big blade that runs around there, and then underneath is what we call the thicknesser. So what I would do is sometimes I have both these machines working together, running together, and if I want to make up maple laminating strips, I would start off with a big lump of 4x2 or whatever I can get of maple, and then I would plane a finished edge here on the overhang, Then I would come over and cut the strip down thicker than it needs to be on the bandsaw, go back with the piece of wood, plane it again, back to the bandsaw, cut it off again, until I've got a heap of strips like this. You wouldn't just do a few at a time while you've got the machine set up, you would do quite a few to keep in stock. So what I end up with is I end up with a strip of wood which is finished planed on one side, coarse on the other where it's gone through the bandsaw. I then set up the thicknesser and would get all the pile of the strips on the top, and I would run them through the thicknesser so that the sawn side would then become finished, and I end up with these. I used to send them out to get them done by a company. It cost a fortune, and some of them weren't accurate, because if you don't get the thickness exactly the same, when you laminate them, they just won't stay on track. They'll start winding off. So that's what I use for that. I don't only use these machines just for making ukulele banjos, because I do other woodwork jobs as well. So these two machines work together sometimes. And this machine is also, you can alter the fence so that you can cut at angles, or plane at angles I should say. And this one is also a tilting table, which allows you to cut up to 45-degree angles. The machines are all great and they're really handy to have, but you've got to know how to set them up. You know, it's you've really got to know how they work and how to set them up so they will function correctly. Now, just over here, I've got another machine, and this is called a bobbin sander, and it's an oscillating. Well, I'll give you an example. If I've got it plugged in. Now, this bobbin sander is the only machine I've got in here that's not record power. The reason, by the way, I buy record power is I can get any spare parts for them. Some of these other makes, they're, once they go kaput, they're end of life really. Now this bobbin sander's got different size bobbins, what we call, and plates, to different size plates for whichever bobbin you're using. Invaluable piece of kit, very lots of time saving you can get from this. And this I would use to shape the peg heads after they've come off the bandsaw, but again, it's only approximate. Everything has to be finished by hand, literally by hand. So this only gives you a rough, or helps a bit with the labour. Now, some of these bobbin sanders have got a tilting bed on them. I didn't bother with that, because what I do is I make my own blocks up if I want to sand at an angle, and I literally just sit them on or glue them, bond them on, and use them, and then when I finish I just get a hammer and knock them off and clean the top off, so I can set up the machine exactly how I want it. So that's the bobbin sander, very useful bit of equipment. Under here I've got a bench saw, which I very rarely use, but that's a Sapatch bench saw for cutting down rough timber if you buy like a big chunk, but it's very rare that again, that can come out because it's on wheels at the back. Then moving over here, I've got a very, very interesting bit of equipment. It's called a belt sander. It's a BS 250 belt sander, and it's got a silicon bed on it. So when you're sanding anything on it, it comes out dead flat. I use this for sanding the fingerboards, and again, they sand it dead flat, but not really, because when you put it on a dead flat surface, there's always a few little marks and things where it's not quite right. So again, they have to be finished by hand on a fine sandpaper. And here I've got a 10-inch, what we call a circular sander really. Some people call them a linisher, but I don't think that's the true thing for them. So that's used a hell of a lot. Sometimes I use it to grind away at the banjo necks to take the worst off, but again everything has to be finished by hand. So just coming over here now, I've got a record power lathe, and this thing I use a hell of a lot. I use it for polishing spinnings. I have a piece of equipment here, it's called a Nova Jaws, which that will replace this thing here, and it goes on there, and I can fit spinnings in there. At the moment you can see there's a bezel fitted in there, and I can either put it with the grips on the outside or on the inside to polish that on the lathe. Very useful bit of equipment, and use it for lots of different things on banjo, mainly for polishing metalwork, as well as using it for various woodworking things. Where are we now? Right here, this thing, actually I bought this to replace my original polishing wheel, but it's a load of rubbish really. It vibrates a lot, but I do use it for rough polishing using Scottish bright pads, and I've kept the old one. I can't find anything to replace it really. I'll show you that in a minute. Down here I have got dust extraction, which fits on any of these machines, but mainly it's most important to operate this one with dust extraction, because there's so many springs and things going on in it that if you didn't have dust extraction it would just clog up and you'd have all sorts of problems with the overhand and thicknesser. But I also use it on the bandsaw as well. So that's more or less that. The pillar drill I use for accurate drilling. This again I use for drilling holes when I'm making the tail pieces. They all have to be centre punched. All the holes have to be spot on. You can't do it with a hand drill, and that's got a lot of applications as well. And moving over here, I've got a bench grinder, one with a medium wheel and one with a finer wheel. And again, that is used mainly for all the metal work I do on the uke banjos. And then over here, this is my linisher or polishing wheel, and in here I keep loads of different what I call polishes, or what we call soaps, to polish up and finish the bezels, all the metal work, everything, all the shoes. They all have to be perfectly polished before they go in for plating, because you know, all the will in the world, if you've got like little marks, scratch marks in any fittings, and you send it in for polishing, I'll promise you it will show up. It's got to be polished as if it's like a piece of jewellery. Otherwise you're going to just show marks up, both in the bezels, in the shoes, in the hooks, and also in the spinnings. So that gets a lot of use. It's a fantastic, it's so old, this thing, and I thought it's time to replace it, but I cannot find any polisher that can replace it at the moment. It's still doing a good job. So I think that's about it, other than yeah, up on the shelf there I keep all my jigs, my profiles out of the way, and I just get up there and get down whatever I want at the time to do the job. Just one other thing, as I say, yeah, all the reason you might be asking why I've got a lot of record power, and I think I mentioned earlier that it's because record power, if I phone up record power and I've got something broken, or I need to realign these cutters, which you need the jigs to do it, I can get everything I can for it, short of any nut or bolt. A lot of the other stuff, like Axminster, I don't know, some of the other stuff that's cheaper, you just can't get the parts for them. They just if they burn out, that's the end of them. Whereas these, you can get a new motor if you need to. So that's why, and when you buy them, you get a 5-year guarantee. So that it's all good stuff. I think that's about it really. In my workshop. Oh, just one other thing is, and things that I've had chats with Alan Yates with this before. Consumables, it's amazing. I mean, this stuff is replacement sanding discs for this, belts, abrasives, bandsaw blades, all the consumables. They cost a fortune, and it's surprising how much you can lose £100 just on consumables alone while carrying out these tasks. So I think that's about it. Hope you find it interesting.